This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 1 of Exploring Drupal 8. What's new in core, part 1. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning.
Here we are recording on an off day for Talking Drupal for a special series that we're starting today about Drupal 8. So over the next 6 episodes of content that you'll find in the Talking Drupal feed, you'll be hearing content concentrated on Drupal 8. So it's really a jump start into understanding what Drupal 8 is. So we're going to do three audio shows that focus on site building and theming. Then we're going to do 3 shows that focus on module development and some other things that we stick in there. And then we're going to have 2 webinars in January that you can join up for now. And we're going to break those 2 webinars into, the first one's going to be about site building. The second one's going to be about development. So it's an opportunity for you to ask some questions regarding those topics and anything that came up while you were listening to these audio episodes. You can find more information about this at exploringdrupal8.com, which is really a subpage within talkingdrupal.com. The webinars are going to be held on January 12th at noontime and then January 19th at noontime. So go to your browser, get on those pages, and register now while seats are available. So for this series, we have some special guests that have joined us from Sego Solutions. We've got our usual cast. You have myself, Stephen Cross from Parallax. We have John Picozzi from Oomph and Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Design. But we also have Nick Salvaggio and Mike Morzavilla. Did I say that right, Mike?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. I practiced a few times before we hit record, so just get tongue-tied for a second. So welcome, guys, to the Talking Drupal show.
Hey, guys. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So this series is going to run a little bit faster than our typical Talking Drupal show does. So we're going to cut back on a little bit of the banter and move right into the meat of these series so you guys can get as much content packed in the time that you're granting us to listen. So why don't we get right started? Today we're going to talk about what's new in core, and we're going to start with views in core. So take it away.
Oh, yeah. So, views, I think it's a module that's pretty well known in the community. I think that's an understatement. It's one of those modules that, we typically have brought into every project, and I think most people can attest to that. And so with Drupal 8, we have views is not only in core, but it's actually it's a part of the core system as well. So not only do we get the benefit of not having to kind of bring this module in over and over again, but some of the core system itself is actually built with views. And some of the key takeaways that I think come out of that are things like our front page, for instance, is now a view. And if you want to change the way the content is being displayed on the front page, we can simply edit that the way we would edit a view. We can add filters to it. We can make it a table. Anything you could do with a view, you can now do that for your front page content, or you can turn it off if you don't want the front page anymore. You don't have to do a node callback, or if you want to have a site builder who doesn't know how to do that, you can just simply disable the view. So I think that's a big thing for views in core, as well as a bunch of other things.
What about some of the admin views? Do you need to use the admin views module now, or what about the user page or the content page?
Yeah, so a lot of the admin screens now are views. There's not going to be, at least I don't believe there's going to be a need for admin views. Everything, I say everything, but I believe it's most things are views now with the admin screens. So again, like something like your content page, you can add filters to that if you want to have authors or sort by who published something last. That kind of flexibility is there. Where for us, typically, those static pages, we would scrap those and build new views to give to our clients. So it kind of just takes half the work out of it that views is already there. We also have new to Drupal 8 a file manager, which is something just new in general, and itself is a view, so we can see all the files on our site, which it sounds pretty basic, but it's anyone who's built sites with Drupal, it's just was never there in the past, and now we have it, and it's a view, so we have the same sort of flexibility over that screen as well.
Where is that accessible from, Mike?
If you go under the content screen, there's a tab there that says File Manager, and you'll be able to see. It's nice too. It kind of shows it shows the file, and it shows every place on the site where that file is used, and it's a nice little addition there. I think it's one of those. I think we're going to see a lot of that with Drupal 8 site building in core, where there's not. There are some monumental changes, but there's a lot of little things that are still very familiar, but kind of add just a nice extension of core, where core is going to be a lot more feature rich.
Mike, you're saying the front page is a view. Is it easy enough for those people that want to use just a standard node for the front page to do that without having to go into the view and disable it or create a view that shows one node?
I believe so.
Yeah, so you still have the settings within the site configuration to set your front page. So your front page doesn't have to be that view; it could be a node.
Yeah, you can go in and select what you want to be your front page. But I mean, typically, in the past, it's always been you have this front page, and if you didn't want it, you had to do a node callback to get rid of it. And now it's a click of a button. You just go in there and disable it.
Okay,
or you can change
that's
it.
cool. I see. I was concerned that they got rid of the ability to set your front page, that you were like stuck with this view, and that scared me.
Yeah, we typically brought in a module for that too, and it's slipping my mind the name of that module to disable that listing page. It was just a basic hook menu that just took it out for us. But,
yeah, disabling the node page.
Yeah. You guys know that one?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we check in on sites often when we're doing like an audit. We forgot to mention that in the last show we did.
You just go to /node and see what they do.
See what shows up. Yeah.
You get some interesting results sometimes. Right? But
cool. All right, so that's views and core. What do we have next here?
So in addition to views and core, there's a bunch of new fields that we have available to us. I'll run through them, and we can kind of touch upon what each one does. Most of them will be fairly obvious just from what they are. But we have the telephone field, the date field, link, entity reference, and email. So in the past, all of these were individual modules. If we wanted the ability to do any of this, we had to bring in each one on its own. So now we don't have to do that anymore. That's going to be kind of like a recurring theme with the what's new in core. It kind of takes away the need for a lot of contributed modules. But some key things about each of these. So like the telephone field actually will make it so it's the input that you put there is mobile friendly, where you can click it and it'll automatically dial the number that's there. So that's a nice little feature. Okay. A downside to it doesn't do any validation. And I've talked to a couple of different folks who do or have done a lot of work with telephone numbers and international telephone numbers. And they seem to think that that's a good thing, that validation on telephone numbers can be very tricky and problematic just because of how diverse they could be. But I was a little bit taken back when you can put anything in that field and it doesn't validate. It was kind of, at first I was like, well, what? why have a telephone field if it doesn't validate telephone numbers?
So how extensive is the back end of that? I mean, will people be able to add on modules to validate? Because I know that was one of the key issues in the backport to Drupal 7. I found myself always using the phone module rather than the telephone module.
I think we're going to see that. I don't know if it's already there, Nick. I don't know if you've come across it yet, but
yeah, I think we have a new element type 2 in the form API to be able to specify the telephone type. So I think what we can do is just either on, from an entity perspective, we can just modify the form and add a validator, our own validator, and we can just, process it as we need it for whatever site we're working on. Or if we're working directly with a custom form that has the telephone field within it, we would write our own validator for that. I think the key thing here is that it's rendering the telephone attribute, the HTML5 attribute, so that browsers will understand it's actually a telephone field.
Right.
Yeah, similar to that, the date field as well renders the HTML5 tag for date. So you'll have the date, however. That's actually a configuration within the widget. You can set it to use the HTML5 date as well, and you get a nice date picker with it, right out of the, and that's all in core. So little things like that, like
it doesn't have an end date though, right?
I don't think it has I don't think so. I think it just, you can select date and time, and then
right.
the various different formats of how you want that to display.
Oh, that's interesting. If it doesn't have a date field, I wonder if we still need some type of date module then within the.
Yeah, if there's no end date or repeating date.
Yeah, it doesn't
some sites
support any of
need
these
that,
things, as far as I can tell.
But depending on the kinds of site you're building, if I look at my projects, I'd say probably only 25-30% of them actually use the end date functionality. So
at least I don't think it has an end date. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't want to say for sure. I don't recall seeing it, but again, Nick, like you were saying, I don't use it. A very small percentage, have it. So I tend to look past it a lot of times unless I'm specifically using it. So I don't think it was there, but I'd have to double check on it.
Yeah. Do you guys know if we're talking about a lot of modules that are obviously been put into core? Is this a case where they just take the existing module and drop it into core, or are they rebuilding it for Drupal 8?
Yeah, I don't think there's much drop-in going on here. I mean, a lot of the module development concepts have been completely revolutionized in Drupal 8, so most of it's rewritten. I mean, I know like views in core, there was a huge initiative for that, and it took a lot of the ideas, the core ideas that C-Tools exposed to us, like the plugin system and things like that, but it's blended with a lot of the ideas within the Symfony community. So it's the concepts are there, but the implementations are much different.
And to that point, we were just talking the other night. I'm wondering if you can actually, and I was going to try this before this call, but it didn't happen, but actually take a view from Drupal 7 and export it and import it into Drupal 8 to see how badly it would break or if it would go through or not. I have a feeling it won't, but...
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go through. I don't think we even have a Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration path for views right now.
Yeah.
There isn't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a few other things with dates, because I just added one. So there's definitely no end date. Also, There's no way to define what time zone a date field is using. So I know that I've run into this issue that do you want the time zone on the date to either be the user's time zone or the system's time zone? It makes a difference if you've got an application, let's say it's a event based and time zones are important. It can't always be based on what the server time zone is that you want to display to users. So there could be a little bit of work that needs to be done here.
That's right. We just ran into that recently, actually, with a project that would have been.
They were in Australia doing stuff, and we didn't even know Australia had multiple time zones, but Australia apparently is as big as the United States.
Us silly Americans, right?
Yeah.
We were like, wow, Australia's big. But
it's too funny. All right, so what else here?
Link field just basically provides you the ability to have a link and set some default text to it. So, you can say, click here to go to my awesome website and it'll link to a URL that you put to it.
Now,
go ahead.
This is also different than the Drupal 7 module, though, right? The backport was URL, and I found the same situation as the phone where, I tried to use the URL module because it uses the HTML5 stuff, but it's just less feature rich, at least the Drupal 7 version. Is this a similar case?
I mean, go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I believe so. I think a lot of these modules probably still have some, features to pack in, and there's probably a lot of conversations happening out there whether or not we should pack them into core or leave it to contrib to fill in those spaces. I think we're seeing a lot of that where we want to pack stuff into core, but we don't want to make it this, views itself was huge, right? I mean, we're like, that's a huge project to include into core. And where does it stop? I mean, now the next thing would be rules or something like that. But there's these small, I think this is kind of a smaller example of that with the link module, maybe, different attributes you can't tag to the field or something like that. But
yeah, the particular issues that I saw were related around display. Like, for example, when you're adding a URL to a view, you can't tweak what the field output is as finely as you can with the link module. And then you just don't have the option.
It looks like there is some work. Well, actually, there hasn't been any activity on it for a while, but there is an 8x branch in the link module, so it looks like there is some work happening there.
Yeah, I anticipate a lot of this stuff being very much like that, where we're going to see that we no longer need a contributed module, but like Nick was saying, both Nicks were saying, it doesn't get as feature rich as maybe some of the what we had in the contributed space. And I think that's going to be the area where contrib comes into. They're going to extend a lot of these, so you get the basic functionality where maybe 50 or 60% of the time that's what you're going to need, and then if you need to go a little bit further, you bring in a small contributed module to extend it.
Mm-hmm. And then hopefully over the time, those contrib modules get brought into core to fill in those gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then entity reference works, as far as I know, works the same as the entity reference field we had in the past. You can relate content between each other, which is nice. We have our email field, which does validate on email addresses, as you would anticipate. Fires up your browser, and you click on email.
I guess that's a little easier problem to validate. It's pretty consistent across the internet.
Yeah, not too much as opposed to phone numbers there.
Are there any fields that seem that they're missing from this new list? Things that you use often that seem like they should be here and they're not?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I was wondering that myself, and I don't think so, actually, as I look at that list.
Yeah, I think date's huge, but I think some of the points that we brought up with some of the missing features there, there may be an opportunity for contrib to fill in that space. But
right.
I mean, we use the address module a lot, but I mean that's pretty. That gets pretty heavy. It breaks everything out into its own field.
The other one that is glaring to me that's missing is location. I don't think that's an 8 at all.
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that too. The thing is that I think location gets used so much less. I mean, it's a huge module,
right?
But it gets used so much on maybe 30% of sites. I mean, if your site uses it, it's generally pretty key. But there's also a huge multitude of sites that don't use it. And location, if you thought validating phone numbers was difficult,
yeah.
You got things like
is pretty much impossible, completely.
You get the thoroughfare field that always messes with me.
It always gets us.
It's not the street; it's thoroughfare. I think it's the address field module.
That's the one we use because we do a lot of Drupal commerce work, and that's a critical piece to Drupal commerce. So it's Yeah, the address field module. It looks like there's no work being done in that space right now on either one of those modules.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. All right, so let's move on.
Okay.
Fields to the item that should have been here 10 years ago.
Yeah. So we now have built-in WYSIWYG in Core, which is, good or bad, depending on how you want to look at it. I think it's great. I think it's going to help with the adoption of Drupal as a whole. We don't need to bring in a WYSIWYG editor, and it's got much tighter integration with our text formats, and the configuration of the WYSIWYG itself is much more friendly. Drag and drop what items you want under what text formats. We can expose those text formats to users based off of how much control we want to give them. Maybe you don't want them to have the full suite of options there. But you just want to be able to bold and underline. So that's what you give them.
And it's CK editor.
Yes, it is using the CK editor.
But you can still import. You can still use other WYSIWYG editors if you want to. You're not now bound to this one.
I think so. Yeah, I think you can turn it off. Because you can select what editor you want to use for particular fields. So you can bring in other ones if you want. What's nice too about this one is that there's image upload support right within the WYSIWYG itself. So on top of having a WYSIWYG, we don't need additional modules like IMCE to do image uploading and things like that.
But it doesn't. The image upload doesn't support what IMCE is best known for, which is picking from the server, right? That's not supported here.
Well, no. Now I think the way it works, you have your image upload button like a standard WYSIWYG, and then once it's there, you can manage all that from your file browser, that new file manager.
So there's no integrated file browser within the uploader itself.
No, there isn't.
Okay, interesting.
Right.
No, so it doesn't do that. It doesn't allow you to pick from the server.
So there's actually a module that I've used, and I'm just looking to see if it's available in D8. It's called File Field Sources, which allows you to basically attach a slew of buttons. It says it's currently being ported to D8. It basically lets you attach buttons to your file and image fields so that you can select where you get them from. So, for example, if you wanted to use a server, something that was on the server, you'd be able to open the file browser right from there. I imagine that's probably going to carry over into D8. But as many of these modules, they haven't gotten around to it yet. So I'm sure they're probably working on that.
Awesome.
Yeah. So another big thing with the WYSIWYG editor is that we have this feature and this concept. It's within Drupal 8 itself, but it applies to the WYSIWYG advanced content filtering, where from a site builder's perspective and a WYSIWYG perspective, what it basically does is it strips out unwanted HTML tags based off of what is allowed within the settings of the editor. So if you go to paste in a table and the table option isn't available in that particular field, it'll strip out all the table tags, but it'll keep the content. So it kind of takes away what's not allowed, but keeps the meat of it. And same would work vice versa. If you were to bring in a table to a field that had the table option selected there, it'll preserve the table, and it does a fairly good job at doing that. It also strips away some nasty word markup and other stuff that tends to get copied into body fields that we all love.
Cool.
So in addition to WYSIWYG, I mean, I think they kind of go hand in hand. Is we have a inline editing capability now, and basically it gives us the option, or gives site editors the option to edit content without having the need to go to a back end an admin screen. They can edit their content right on the page that it sits, or a good portion of it. You can edit images, you can edit captions, you can edit titles,
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about this because I could see kind of like we're using presets within the WYSIWYG where you kind of constrain what clients can do on the page, define your layout to some style guide, and then have them be able to edit these individual components on the page. It allows us to keep our content really structured, but then allow editability within a defined layout. I think there's going to be some interesting stuff coming out of this.
Does it have control over who can edit what? Is it using?
I haven't actually tried to restrict it to like a role or see if I could do any sort of permission work with it. That's a good question though, because I know with like and now the name of the module, it's a panelizer. There's a panels module that allows for kind of an inline editing type of feel that we've used in the past that you can restrict by role and how much of it you kind of allow by role and permission and things like that. But I haven't played around with the inline editing that much. From what I can tell, it's open. It's pretty open.
I can see that being important. You have an editor come in that should only be able to change a certain section of the page.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it would use the permissions table. So if you can edit it in the back end, you can edit it in the front end.
Yeah, I know the REST module does it. I was just reading the REST module the other day, and it outputs based on permissions to the field level.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like it's probably because you can select who can edit what piece of a certain piece of content. So it could probably be governed by that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. So the last thing on our list here for this first episode.
Yeah. So the contact form, and I kind of just came across this. We've been going around doing a bunch of different talks on site building and module development, and I came across the contact form and realized that this is it's new in the fact that the contact form itself is now completely fieldable. We're not stuck with just our email subject and body. We can add.
Oh, really?
We can add as many fields as we want to this contact form. We can also add multiple contact forms for the site. We can only set one as a default, which will, when you go to /contact, it'll be that one. But, you can field it with, to your heart's content. You put radial buttons on there, whatever you can think of. So kind of the whole web form module, just for the need of having a drop down on your contact form. You don't need to use web forms or even do, a hook form alter, to the stock form. You have the ability right within site building to extend it, and in addition, have multiple contact forms for different areas of your site.
Does it keep a record of responses?
I don't know. I don't know if it. I know web forms is great for that, but I don't know if this does that. I just kind of stumbled upon it myself. One thing I do know is that when you're creating these contact forms, for me, I was a bit confused at first because I didn't understand how to access these. I created 4 contact forms, and it seemed at first the only thing I could do is choose which one got set as the default contact form. But I figured out, what it does is it actually creates a path for each one. It doesn't clearly say that as you're building them, but the path is /contact/ the title of whatever you made. Each contact form has a required title field. And then you can just reference those contact forms via that URL. So
that's very cool.
Yeah, I don't see a schema file defined in the module. I don't think it does save the data. That's
and maybe there'll be a contributed module that'll come along to extend it, hopefully, because that's a big part of web forms too. I think that's
I think I've once used the contact form.
Yeah, it's usually gets ripped out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is in web. Just because we've mentioned web forms a few times, it looks like there's some work being done on it, but I'm not sure it's in any condition. I'm not even sure you can install it. An entity form looks like it's probably in the same kind of shape. Mm-hmm. That it's not ready for, serious consumption yet. Mm-hmm. So I think if forms are an important part of your website, Drupal 8 might not be ready for you yet.
Yeah, I read a good article the other day, and of course, I'm not going to be able to give credit because the author and the name of it are eluding me. But it was, I think it was titled "Contact." I don't remember, but it was basically saying that web forms, the contact form in Drupal 8 has come a long way, but there's still going to be a need for web forms if you're doing heavy, form stuff on your site. So I don't think the web forms is going away.
All right, guys. So we have just wrapped up part 1 of episode 1 for New in Core. So we're going to stop this recording, and we will see you for part 2 of New in Core. Thanks, guys, and talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.